Hi, I'm Jeremy Schwartz, host of American Criminal. In this season, slavery, people trafficking, fraud, and murder are just some of the things Sante Kimes did to get what she wanted. Listen to American Criminal Sante Kimes wherever you get your podcasts. Or to get ad-free access to the entire season first, subscribe at IntoHistory.com.
It's Friday, January 16th, 1998, in the crowded food court of a mall in Washington, D.C. A young woman sits alone on a quick lunch break. As she waits for a friend to meet her, she appears anxious and on edge. She taps her foot nervously on the floor and frequently checks her watch. Then suddenly she feels a tap on her shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am?" When the young woman turns around, she is surprised to find two tall, imposing men staring down at her. The men wear sharp black suits, dark sunglasses, and earpieces. They brandish shiny bronze badges with the unmistakable seal of the FBI emblazoned on the front. "We need you to come with us, ma'am." The woman is taken aback. She stands to confront the two agents. "What's this about?" "We don't want any trouble, ma'am. We just need to ask you a few questions. Please, if you come with us." The woman snatches her purse from the table. "You know what? You have no right to accost me like this without an explanation." She raises a finger and points it angrily at the agent's face. "You can go fuck yourself." The agent brushes off the insult and smiles. "Ma'am, you've been accused of committing a federal crime. As of right now, you stand to do serious time." The other agent chimes in. "You can either come with us now, clear up a few things, and be on your way, or we can issue a warrant for your arrest." The woman's anger turns to confusion. "Federal crime? What crime? I haven't done anything wrong." "Perjury, ma'am. Lying under oath." The man turns to his partner. "Crime of that caliber can get you 27 years last time I checked. Isn't that right?" His partner nods in agreement. "Yeah. We're giving you a chance to explain yourself, miss, right now. No hassle, but you need to come with us." The woman looks down. "This better be quick." The agents lead the woman out of the mall and across the street to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where scores of FBI agents and federal prosecutors are waiting. As the woman enters the suite, she can feel the eyes of every man and woman in the room glued to her every move. In the middle of the suite is a round table with a single chair at one end and a tape recorder placed at the center. A man in a black suit stands by the table, waiting to greet the woman. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice. I wasn't given much of a choice." "Understood. This won't take long. We'll begin right away. Please take a seat." As the frightened woman sits down, the man picks up the tape recorder from the table, holds it up to his mouth, and presses record. "This is Michael Emick, lead prosecutor in the case of sexual misconduct brought against the incumbent President Bill Clinton. This is a first interview with a primary witness. Commencing now." He lowers the tape recorder from his mouth and places it on the table directly in front of the young woman. He folds his arms, leans in, and looks her straight in the eye. "Now then, Miss Lewinsky, let's start from the very beginning." From Airship, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Election's Wicked Game. Monica Lewinsky was 24 years old when she was interrogated at the Ritz-Carlton. She was held for over 12 hours before the FBI released her. She was accused of lying under oath for denying her affair with President Bill Clinton. Lewinsky didn't know that her friend and close confidant, Linda Tripp, had secretly recorded their conversations. The Lewinsky tapes, as they would come to be known, became the central focus of a federal investigation into President Clinton, and they sparked months of intense legal battles and public hearings. On January 26, 1998, at an event at the White House, Clinton denied the affair.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
6 months later, Lewinsky signed an immunity agreement with the federal prosecutors overseeing the case and confessed to lying under oath. And on August 17, 1998, President Clinton officially changed his story in a primetime address.
As you know,
In a deposition in January, I was asked questions about my relationship with Monica Lewinsky. While my answers were legally accurate, I did not volunteer information. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate.
Throughout the year, the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal dominated the tabloids and the mainstream news. In the minds of many, Lewinsky became a social pariah. Clinton's political reputation was severely damaged, for some, irrevocably. In the 2000 election, the Democrats needed a candidate who would rescue the party from scandal and forge a new path forward. They would look to the very man who had served by Clinton's side from the beginning. During his tenure as vice president, Al Gore helped President Clinton preside over the second largest period of economic prosperity in U.S. history. Gore was President Clinton's hand-picked successor, but the public backlash to the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal placed Gore in a tricky position. On the one hand, Gore needed to convey loyalty to his president and to the party, but he also needed to separate himself from the president's tainted image. To lead the party into a new millennium, Gore would have to survive Clinton's scandals and outlast a popular Texas governor with a cowboy's charisma and a famous last name. This is episode 54, the election of 2000, Bush versus Gore versus Nader, Gettin' Snippy. It's August 18th, 1998 in Washington, D.C. Jennifer Devlin, a press spokeswoman for Second Lady Tipper Gore, fields a barrage of questions from B. Drummond Ayers Jr., a reporter for the Washington Bureau of the New York Times.
Come on, Jennifer. You expect me to believe this vacation is a coincidence?
Believe what you want.
Clinton testifies yesterday before a grand jury and then goes on a national television and admits to the inappropriate relationship, and the vice president is conspicuously absent.
Vice President Gore is in Hawaii with the Second Lady and several of their children. Ayers wonders if Gore's absence from Washington is intentional. The vice president and his family always take a 2-week vacation at this time of year.
Where is he staying?
At a private home on one of the islands. We're not saying which one, and his schedule is private.
Any business being conducted on the trip?
He'll do a Democratic fundraiser in Honolulu, and he'll also speak to a meeting of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.
Huh.
Devlin knows what Ayers is thinking, that Al Gore is hiding from the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. Look, Hawaii is a sentimental place for the Gores. They went there on their honeymoon in 1970. They go back as often as they can.
So did Al spend the day on the beach, or was he glued to the television?
Nothing on that.
Any comment on the events transpiring in Washington?
No comment.
Come on, Jennifer, you gotta give me something.
Sorry, but there's nothing to give. In his article in the Times, reporter B. Drummond Ayers Jr. wrote, "When President Clinton appeared Monday before the grand jury, hearing evidence in the Monica Lewinsky investigation, hardly anybody had a better reason to be closely tuned in than Al Gore. But in fact, the vice president was about as far away from Washington as he could get. In fact, throughout the investigations into Clinton, Gore had largely been silent. Even when he did speak out on the matter, the vice president was tactfully vague. On the day of Clinton's public confession, Gore issued a statement. I am proud of him, not only because he is a friend, but because he is a person who has had the courage to acknowledge mistakes. Gore's obscure stance kept him at a distance from his political partner. Yet he remained tied to the Clinton brand, and with the 2000 campaign quickly approaching by no fault of his own, Gore was already playing from behind. If Al Gore was running from the shadow of Clinton's mistakes, Texas Governor George W. Bush had his own shadow to outrun. His father, George H.W. Bush, America's 41st president. Bush Sr.'s political legacy, coupled with the long-lasting prestige of the Bush family name, contributed to George W. Bush being labeled an establishment candidate. Far from the image of the traditional salt-of-the-earth conservative that Bush embodied as governor, his family history led many of his detractors to write him off as a trust fund kid. Although vastly different in their respective political worldviews, George W. Bush and Al Gore shared common experiences. They both came from political families. They had privileged upbringings and attended Ivy League schools, and they both served in the military. However, unlike Gore, Bush arrived late to the world of American politics. Outside of a failed run for Congress in 1978 and working on his father's campaign, Bush had little political experience. His victory in the 1994 Texas governor's race elevated his national profile and made him extremely popular, especially in the South. He styled his public appeal around two traditionally conservative values, his Christian faith and his commitment to family. In the minds of many Republicans, these values made Bush a strong contrast to the Clinton legacy. By September of 1998, Bush was already being tipped as the favorite for the Republican nomination. Polls conducted in Texas from early September showed 55% of Texan voters were in favor of Bush as a potential candidate. Additionally, Bush had already been hard at work trying to win the upcoming Texas governor's race. The transition from campaigning for governor to campaigning for president would be seamless. While Governor Bush fought to escape the shadow of his family's legacy, Bill Clinton's legacy was under fire. In light of his affair with Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton was handed a rare dishonor. On December 19, 1998, for only the second time in American history at that point, the United States House of Representatives voted to approve articles of impeachment against the president. Clinton was charged with lying under oath to a federal grand jury and obstructing justice. After the impeachment, Gore stayed quiet. He fulfilled his duties as vice president, but he never fully addressed the scandal. Clinton would later be acquitted in the Senate and not removed from office, but his impeachment would cast a shadow over the 2000 election. Both Gore and Bush announced their candidacies in June of 1999. In his announcement speech in his home state of Tennessee, Gore talked about climate change and took credit for the roaring Clinton economy. Yet he also made a subtle attempt to distance himself from Clinton's character, saying, "I will take my own values of faith and family to the presidency." It seems Gore was going to challenge Bush in making faith and family the centerpiece of the campaign. But early in the primary, values gave way to invective when Gore's biggest competitor, New Jersey Senator Bill Bradley, went on the attack. According to reporting in the New York Times, Bradley stated that Vice President Al Gore, while running for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1988, was responsible for turning the released murderer Willie Horton into a racially divisive symbol of the campaign. As the Times explained, the image of Horton, a black man who committed rape while on furlough from a Massachusetts prison, was used in ads meant to attack Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis, the Democratic nominee. The controversial Willie Horton ads were created by supporters of then-candidate George H.W. Bush, but Bradley told the press that Mr. Gore brought up Mr. Horton first. Gore's campaign dismissed Bradley's assertion, prompting Bradley to call into question Gore's honesty, asking, "How can you trust Al Gore to tell the truth as president when he can't even tell the truth as a candidate?" Despite Bradley's attacks, Gore would outlast him. Bradley would stay in the race until after Super Tuesday, but he would never win a primary contest. In the Republican primary, Bush went to war against an Arizona senator with a bulletproof resume and a sterling reputation. John McCain, a popular war hero and well-respected member of the Republican Party, posed a serious threat to Bush's prospects. Despite losing the first primary in Iowa on January 24th, McCain would rebound a week later with a surprise win in New Hampshire. Shaken by the unexpected defeat, Bush's team realized that they had their hands full with a man many in Washington called the Maverick. So turning their attention to the crucial primary in South Carolina, the Bush campaign shifted into overdrive. There, the Republican primary would become a war zone of personal shots and salacious rumors. With the presidency on the line, nothing would be off limits. The gloves would come off, and the Maverick would try to hit Bush where it hurt the most. In the run-up to the South Carolina primary, John McCain spearheaded a media onslaught. The McCain camp's attack centered around the Bush campaign's exorbitant fundraising efforts. McCain called for reforms to stop out-of-control private money in political campaigns. These accusations tapped into an underlying concern many Bush detractors shared, that the wealthy, elitist Bush dynasty was trying to buy the election. Bush's team hit back hard. In what many viewed as a low blow, the Bush camp attacked McCain's record supporting the military, accusing him of abandoning fellow veterans throughout his political career. On February 3, 2000, during a speech in Sumter, South Carolina, Governor Bush brought J. Thomas Birch, Jr., a Vietnam War veteran and the chairman of the Vietnam Veterans Committee, to the stage. Birch attacked McCain's character and questioned his loyalty, telling the crowd, "He came home, and then he forgot us." In response, 5 U.S. senators and Vietnam War veterans, including Democratic Senator John Kerry, immediately came to McCain's defense. On February 5th, 2 days after the speech in Sumter, the senators issued a joint statement urging Bush to publicly disassociate with Birch's claims and apologize to Senator McCain. 2 days after that, on February 7th, McCain fired back with an ad campaign comparing Bush to President Clinton. In the ad, McCain says to camera, "Governor Bush's campaign is getting desperate with a negative ad about me. His ad twists the truth, like Clinton. We're all pretty tired of that. As president, I'll be conservative, and I'll always tell you the truth, no matter what." Around that same time, rumors began circulating in the press that Senator McCain's wife, Cindy, had been struggling with a crippling prescription drug addiction for years. Another rumor claimed that McCain's dark-skinned daughter was the love child of an extramarital affair. In reality, the senator and his wife had adopted the child from Bangladesh. The Bush camp denied responsibility for the rumors, while McCain claimed that Bush was dealing in the dark arts of shady politics. As McCain would later write, in emails, faxes, flyers, postcards, telephone calls, and talk radio, groups and individuals circulated all kinds of wild rumors about me, from the old Manchurian candidate allegation to charges of having sired children with prostitutes. There wasn't a damn thing I could do about the subterranean assaults on my reputation, except to act in a way that contradicted their libel. When things got so bad that I became discouraged by my own negative ads, we pulled them. But I spent too much of my time denouncing my opponent's campaign tactics instead of sticking with the message that I believed in, that had worked so well in New Hampshire. The vitriolic back and forth between Bush and McCain continued for weeks until the day of the South Carolina primary, where, to the surprise of many pundits, Bush defeated McCain by a margin of 12%. On Super Tuesday, March 7, 2000, both Bush and Gore ran the table and statistically guaranteed their victories. In the summer of 2000, both Bush and Gore announced their vice presidential picks before their respective party conventions. Bush chose the former Secretary of Defense in his father's administration and a close family ally, former Congressman Dick Cheney. On August 3rd, Bush wrapped up the Republican National Convention with what many considered his finest speech to date. In it, he went on the attack.
Our current president embodied the potential of a generation. So many talents, so much charm, such great skill. But in the end, to what end? So much promise to no great purpose.
Gore's vice presidential pick made history. Connecticut Senator Joseph Lieberman became the first Jewish American to be placed on a major national party ticket. But Gore arguably chose Lieberman for an altogether different reason. Throughout the Lewinsky trial, Senator Lieberman had been a highly vocal critic of President Clinton. If the party conventions were perfunctory and mere inevitable coronations, what came after was something altogether different. As both candidates prepared for the fall election, neither had any way of knowing that the path ahead would be riddled with chaos and uncertainty. The 2000 election would be a confusing, tumultuous affair defined by dirty tricks, distrust, and discontent. The contest would put the fail-safes of the Constitution to the test, and it would make many question the very foundations of the electoral process.
Uma pausa no seu podcast para contar que chegou o novo Peugeot 2008, um carro que impressiona até quem já viu de tudo. Conheça uma experiência de puro prazer em dirigir com acabamento sofisticado e design inconfundível. Descubra como conforto e tecnologia podem elevar o nível da sua experiência de direção. Conheça o novo Peugeot 2008 e deixe a inspiração te guiar.
Did you know you can skip ads and promos like these and listen to all episodes of American Election's Wicked Game without interruption by subscribing at intohistory.com? And not only will you be getting the whole series ad-free and bingeable, but you also get access to over a dozen more incredible history podcasts, also all ad-free, like Wild West Extravaganza, a journey back to the fascinating, tumultuous, and often violent world of the American Old West. From famous outlaws like Billy the Kid and Jesse James, to lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok, to trailblazing pioneers and frontiersmen, Wild West Extravaganza tells the true stories of the real-life characters who shaped this iconic era. So saddle up and discover the true history of the American frontier, the good, the bad, and the ugly, ad-free at intohistory.com. One major source of conflict in the 2000 election was the fact that it was not strictly a two-man race. Back in February, activist, author, and lawyer Ralph Nader had kicked off his run as the Green Party candidate for president. Nader had tried for the White House before to little success or impact. But in the 2000 election, Nader's push for campaign finance reform and environmental preservation was catching on. By October of 2000, Nader had earned the support of many prominent public figures, mainly for his stance against both Bush and Gore, each of whom he considered equally corrupted by corporate interference. At a Green Party rally in Madison Square Garden on October 13th, Nader told a crowd of over 15,000 they look the same and they act the same. He referred to Gore and Bush as Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Although Nader had been excluded for the most part from national media coverage, he had earned enough support to constitute a legitimate threat, especially for Gore. Nader had potential to cut into the liberal faction of the Democratic base, and as October dragged on, with election night creeping closer by the day, many Democrats began calling for Nader to drop out. On October 26th, Eric Alterman, a popular journalist and columnist for The Nation, penned a widely read article urging Nader to withdraw. Alterman wrote, "Nader has been campaigning aggressively in Florida, Minnesota, Michigan, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin. If Gore loses even a few of those states, then hello, President Bush. And if Bush does win, then goodbye to much of what Nader and his followers profess to cherish." The race was tight, and in the final stretch of the campaign, it was becoming clear to both sides that every vote would count. Heading into Election Day on November 7th, 2000, the Gore camp had identified 3 states which they predicted would determine the outcome of the election: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida. These 3 swing states constituted a massive chunk of electoral votes, and they could go either way. The Gore camp considered these 3 states must-wins. As early as 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day, exit polls conducted by major news networks showed Gore with a steady lead in both Florida and Michigan. Bush, they predicted, would carry Pennsylvania. Over the next several hours, as exit polls continued to be released, Gore's team grew increasingly confident in their chances. So much so that a few Gore staffers even snuck out to buy new suits for the victory celebration. By late afternoon, exit polls indicated that Gore's lead in Florida and Michigan were both holding strong. By 7:50 p.m., 10 minutes before the close of polling stations across the eastern seaboard, CNN, CBS, and NBC made the first of a slew of announcements.
A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column. This is a state both campaigns desperately wanted to win.
Florida goes for Al Gore. Now, folks, the equation changes. CBS News estimates when all the votes are in and counted, the Sunshine State will have plenty of sunshine for Al Gore.
We're going to now project an important win for Vice President Al Gore. NBC News projects that he wins the 25 electoral votes in the state of Florida. It turns out that Governor Jeb Bush was not his brother's keeper. The family had been joking.
Gore watched the night unfold from a suite on the 10th floor of the Lowe's Hotel in downtown Nashville, surrounded by family and friends. The win in Florida, along with a predicted win in Michigan, meant that victory was all but assured. The room was buzzing with excitement. 10 minutes after the Florida announcements, MSNBC made another call.
Chris, we got a big one. The state of Michigan has just gone to Vice President Al Gore. And what does this mean, Chris?
Pennsylvania means those 18 there, and the 25 from Florida means the 23 from Pennsylvania is essential, it seems to me.
Half an hour later, at 8:47 p.m., another.
We are calling the state of Pennsylvania right now, interrupting myself, for Al Gore. NBC News is projecting that when the votes are counted, Pennsylvania will go the vice president's way. This was the big state everyone was waiting for tonight, especially after the early big states like Florida, like Michigan.
By 9 p.m., it seemed Gore had won the trifecta of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and the big prize, Florida. With sweeping wins in the upper Midwest, the Pacific Coast, and most of the Northeast, Gore and the nation were beginning to sense that his victory was at hand. At about the same time, in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Austin, Texas, Governor Bush watched anxiously as his chance at the White House slipped away.
Chris Matthews, what does this mean for George W. Bush's hopes of winning the presidency tonight?
Well, I don't want to be the first one to say it, but I'm going to let Ed Rollins take the crack. You've ran Republican campaigns for president successfully. Is this the final defeat?
Well, unless all the networks and all the pollsters are going to get lots of egg on their face because there's some hidden vote out there that we haven't seen, I think it's pretty much over.
Surrounded by family, close friends, and members of his staff, Governor Bush watched the drama of the night unfold with his father sitting right by his side. With every state Bush won, Bush Sr. turned and gave his son a reassuring thumbs up. Bush was predicted to sweep the South, the Midwestern farming states, and the Rocky Mountain West. Still, with Florida, Michigan, and Pennsylvania called for Gore, Bush's prospects looked grim. By 9:44 p.m., after New Mexico and Minnesota went in the Gore column, defeat seemed imminent. But over the next hour, the mood in both camps would radically shift. As Al Gore and his team began celebrating what seemed to be a certain victory, Gore's chief strategist, Michael Woolley, received a perplexing call from a colleague on the ground in Florida who said, "We have a problem here, Michael. This thing is going to be really close. In fact, my model has us actually losing by 54 votes." By 9:54 p.m., not 10 minutes after Gore seemed the sure winner, the same news networks that had predicted his victory in Florida began shockingly reversing their calls.
What the networks giveth, the networks taketh away. NBC News is now taking Florida out of Vice President Gore's column and putting it back in the too close to call column.
Stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column. 25 very big electoral votes in the home state of the governor's brother, Jeb Bush, are hanging in the balance. This no longer is a victory for Vice President Gore.
Wait a second. Hold on a second, everybody. Okay, this is unbelievable. CBS has just reversed its call on Florida.
With the sudden retraction of Florida, celebrations at the Lowe's Hotel came to an abrupt end. For a few short minutes, Gore experienced the elation of an election night victory before a sobering new reality forced its way in. The election was no longer a statistical guarantee for either camp. With Florida's 25 electoral votes up for grabs, the Sunshine State quickly became the deciding factor of the night. Just after midnight, with every polling station across the nation closed and the last votes officially cast, networks announced that Gore had won Pennsylvania and Michigan, 2 parts of the trifecta. But the race was still tight. As expected, Bush came out strong in the South and the Midwest, including huge wins in Ohio and, to the surprise of most, New Hampshire. By 1 a.m., networks officially called all but 3 states, Oregon, Wisconsin, and Florida. Both candidates were short of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. And even taken together, Oregon and Wisconsin's electoral votes were not enough to push either man over the top. In the end, it would have to come down to Florida. As Florida's Secretary of State, it fell to Katherine Harris to verify the state's final vote count. At around 2 a.m., Harris, a Bush family ally, did so, announcing that Bush had officially won the state of Florida by a margin of 50,000 votes. Fox News made the announcement first, followed shortly after by CNN and NBC. After the announcements, in a now quiet and somber suite at the Lowe's Hotel, a dejected Gore told his staff, "I'm really grateful to you all. I want to concede, and I want to be gracious about all of this." Gore called an elated Governor Bush within minutes, congratulating him and offering his humble concession. Immediately after the call, Gore left his hotel suite, hopped in a limousine, and headed to the War Memorial Auditorium in downtown Nashville to address his supporters and deliver the disappointing news. It's election night 2000, just after 2 a.m. Rain pours down on the streets of Nashville. Mike Feldman, Gore's chief of staff, rides in the back of a van, one of many vehicles in Al Gore's motorcade. Gore is en route to an auditorium in downtown Nashville, where a large crowd of eager supporters wait to hear from their candidate. But Mike Feldman knows something they don't. Gore is going to announce his concession. Feldman is so dejected he's turned off his cell phone. The race over, there's no reason to keep it on. But as the motorcade turns onto a street a few blocks away from the venue, Feldman's pager goes off. The message reads, "Please call switchboard for Michael Woolley." Woolley is one of Gore's top campaign operatives. So Feldman turns on his cell phone and dials him back right away.
"I tried you on your phone."
"Sorry, it's just turned off."
"Where the fuck are you?"
"In the motorcade. He's going to give his speech."
"Speech about what?"
"I just got off the phone with Bush. He's going to concede."
"I just got off the phone with Nick Baldick. You gotta stop him."
Nick Baldick is Gore's top man on the ground in Florida. As Woolley launches into his frantic explanation, Feldman struggles to keep up.
"The networks are saying it's 50,000 votes, but they're wrong."
Wait, what do you mean wrong?
Baldick checked the Florida Secretary of State's website.
Have you looked into it?
I'm looking at it right now. It's under 6,000 votes. We're within the automatic recount.
Feldman is stunned into silence. If Woolley is right, the race is far from over. Woolley breaks the silence and barks into the phone.
"Are you with Bill? Is he there? I need to talk with Bill right now."
After his call with Michael Woolley, Feldman dialed in Bill Daley, Gore's campaign chairman. Even as Woolley explained the situation to Daley, Bush's lead in Florida was decreasing rapidly. Daley immediately understood that priority number one was stopping Gore from walking on that stage and throwing in the towel. Like Feldman, Daley was riding in a vehicle that was part of the motorcade, but neither Daley nor Feldman were in the limo with the vice president. Even as Gore was stepping out of his limo and headed inside the War Memorial Auditorium, the gap in votes continued to shrink. In the pouring rain, one of Gore's speechwriters, a man who had ridden to the venue with Bill Daley, hopped out of his vehicle, ran through the crowd, and caught up with Gore. The speechwriter told the vice president not to go on stage, explaining, "With 99% of the vote counted, you're only 600 votes behind." The new reality in Florida demanded a new strategy. Gore did not take the stage and concede. Instead, realizing the urgency of the moment, the vice president put in a call to Governor Bush. As multiple news outlets would later report, the tone of that infamous call would quickly turn from cordial to snippy. Tired of ads and promos like these? Want to skip ahead to newer elections? You can listen to all episodes of American Elections Wicked Game without interruption by subscribing at intohistory.com. But not only that, you also get access to over a dozen more incredible history podcasts, also all ad-free. That includes the American Revolution podcast, a deep and thorough investigation of the times, people, and politics behind America's fight for independence. Also, the battles, because we can't start a new American nation without guns. And the American Revolution podcast tells the story of the revolution from beginning to end, from its origins in the French and Indian War through the war itself and on to the founding of the United States. Get American Elections Wicked Game, the American Revolutions podcast, and many others ad-free with bonus content at intohistory.com. Subscribe now at intohistory.com. If you're a careful Wicked Game listener, you know in the credits I mentioned my friend Professor Greg Jackson and his podcast, History That Doesn't Suck. It's a great show. But one way it can doesn't suck even more is when you listen to it without ads. You can listen to all episodes of American Elections Wicked Game, all episodes of History That Doesn't Suck, and all episodes of many more great history podcasts without interruption by subscribing at intohistory.com. History That Doesn't Suck is a deeply researched chronological survey of American history from a trained academic who also knows how to tell a story. Plus, in addition to ad-free listening to one of the best American history podcasts out there, you get scores of bonus episodes at intohistory.com. Subscribe now at intohistory.com. It's the earliest hours of Wednesday, November 8th, in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in Austin, Texas. Governor George W. Bush sits on a sofa, wide awake, surrounded by his family and close friends. The lobby is full of energy as guests celebrate the news. In a daze, the governor tries to process his new reality. He's going to be the 43rd president of the United States. Out of the corner of his eye, he notices one of his staffers approaching, nervously, a cell phone in his hand. "Sir, it's Vice President Gore. He says he needs to speak with you. He says it's urgent." The staffer hands Bush the phone. He grabs it with a suspicious look on his face. "Al, what's this about?"
Mr. Governor, are you aware of the situation that's developing in Florida?
Bush lets out an irritated chuckle, feeling somewhat insulted. "Mr. Governor? It hasn't been an hour since you called me Mr. President."
Yes, the circumstances have changed. The vote in Florida is too close to call. They're triggering a recount. As of now, this election is undecided.
Bush springs up from his sofa chair. Wait, let me understand. You're calling me back to retract your concession?"
The law demands that I do, George. Technically speaking, I had nothing to concede in the first place.
"Listen here, Al. Every news outlet declared me the winner. My brother, the governor of Florida, says it's a done deal." Gore responds with impatience behind his voice.
Let me explain something to you. Your younger brother is not the ultimate authority on this.
Bush pauses for a moment with a look of disbelief on his face before replying in an icy tone. "You do what you have to do, Al."
Well, you don't have to be snippy about it.
The conversation ends abruptly as Bush hangs up the phone. He's visibly angry as he reaches for a remote to turn up the volume on the television. He gestures to his guests to quiet down as the sound of the news broadcast begins to fill the room. As Bush stands in front of the screen, absorbing the new information, his father, Bush Sr., slides up next to him. "Well, Dad, now I guess I know how you felt in '92, losing to Clinton." His father continues staring forward at the screen, shaking his head. "No, son, I'm afraid you don't. This is a hell of a lot worse. As NPR would later report, Wednesday, November 8th dawned with some uncertainty as to who would be the next president. In the hours that followed, the nation came to know the name Katherine Harris. Harris was the Florida Secretary of State. It was her job to legally certify the winner of the statewide vote. In the wee hours of the morning on Wednesday, November 8th, Harris had declared Bush the victor in Florida. But there was a problem. On November 9th, an incomplete count put Bush's lead at only 1,784 votes. According to Florida state law, because his margin of victory was less than 0.5% of the total votes cast, this meant that every vote in every county had to be automatically recounted. And until the recount was done, the election was not over. Gore won the popular vote handily by 500,000 votes or more, but as Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution makes clear, at the end of the day, it's the count in the Electoral College alone that matters. 270 electoral votes are required to win. Gore finished election night with 250, just 4 ahead of Bush, who finished with 246. NPR continued, Republicans were dismayed at the idea of a recount. They insisted they had won Florida. The vote had been announced by the state's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris. So lawyers for both sides converged on Florida, bracing for what would be a 5-week-long legal battle. On November 9th, a mandatory machine recount began in all 67 Florida counties. After the machine recount was done on November 10th, Bush's lead dropped from 1,784 to 327. But there were even more problems. Polling stations across the state were reporting irregularities with many of the ballots. Florida used what was known as a butterfly ballot, which splits the page down the middle with a series of hole punches. Each hole punch corresponds to a candidate's name. Volunteer counters began noticing that many of the hole punches on the butterfly ballots had not been fully cut out, but many were merely dented or partially cut. These incomplete hole punches became known by another now infamous name, hanging chads. And even still, the hanging chads were just the beginning. There were pregnant chads, paper ballots that were dimpled but not pierced, overvotes, ballots that recorded multiple votes for the same office, and undervotes, ballots that recorded no vote at all. It seemed very likely that these irregular ballots could not be processed by a machine. So Democrats sued to force a manual recount in 4 counties, despite Harris certifying Bush the winner. Meanwhile, Bush sued to try to stop the manual recount. State law stipulated that all ballots had to be counted by November 14th, 1 week after the election. But the recount deadline came and went, and only one of the 4 counties had completed a manual recount. The Gore camp requested an extension. A state judge denied the request. Katherine Harris gave the remaining counties until 2 p.m. on November 15th to, in her words, submit a written statement of the facts, justifying any belief on their part that they should be allowed to amend their certified returns previously filed by them in accordance with law. Shortly after the deadline she set on November 15th, Harris held a press conference.
All 3 counties, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Broward, responded by the 2 p.m. deadline today. I've decided it is my duty under Florida law to exercise my discretion in denying these requested amendments.
On November 17th, a Florida Circuit Court authorized Katherine Harris to certify the election results and declare a winner without complete hand recounts. The Florida Supreme Court put a hold on that decision, waiting to hear an appeal from the Gore camp. By late November, Florida had become a political war zone. Many Democratic voters accused the Bush family of manipulating the system. According to Vanity Fair writer David Margolick, Secretary Katherine Harris remained one of George W.'s 8 campaign co-chairs for Florida right up until Election Day. She was also a political ally of Bush's brother Jeb, the governor of Florida. Additionally, as the Washington Post reported in November, in yet another bizarre twist to an already surreal campaign, the head of Fox News' election night decision desk, who recommended calling Florida and the election for George W. Bush, turns out to be Bush's first cousin. But many Republican voters were equally suspicious of the Democrats. George W. Bush had held on to a lead in not 1, but 2 recounts. According to Florida state law, only 1 recount was required to determine the winner. The Democrats, they argued, were rewriting Florida's state laws and trying to steal the election. As to the Democrats' claims of shady dealings, many Republicans pointed out that Governor Jeb Bush had recused himself the morning of November 8th and that Secretary Katherine Harris was simply doing her job and following the law. But on November 21st, Florida's Supreme Court unanimously ruled in favor of the Democrats, stating that the hand recounts in the 3 counties must be included. The state Supreme Court set 5 p.m. on November 26th as the new deadline. When news of the court's decision reached the public, things turned violent. In downtown Miami, at the headquarters for the Miami-Dade wing of the Democratic Party, rioters stormed the front doors of the building, trampling, punching, and kicking volunteers on the way, demanding an end to the recount. The next day, the Bush camp appealed to the nation's highest legal authority, the United States Supreme Court. In essence, the Bush legal team argued that Al Gore and the Democrats were attempting to rewrite Florida law. Florida Supreme Court, they argued, had broken its own laws by extending the deadline. On November 26th, after the new deadline for the manual recount had expired, Secretary Harris certified the Florida election and again declared Bush the winner. This time by 537 votes, a margin of 1/100%. But once again, not all of the counties conducting manual recounts were able to meet the deadline. And according to the New York Times, Miami-Dade, one of the largest counties by population in Florida, failed to turn in any ballots at all. According to some reports, over 45,000 ballots had not been included. So on November 27th, Gore sued again to contest the results in Florida. But time was running out. The Electoral College was set to convene and decide the election on December 18th. On December 8th, Florida judges ordered yet another manual recount. The next day, on December 9th, the United States Supreme Court suddenly halted that process. And then, on December 12th, the justices of the United States Supreme Court overturned the Florida judges, ruling 5-4 that there would be no further counting of Florida's ballots. The November 26th recount would stand as the final tally for the election. The next day, on December 13th, 5 days before the Electoral College convened, Al Gore conceded.
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time.
Gore's concession put an end to one of the closest, most controversial elections in American history. Bush became the first son of a president to win the White House since John Quincy Adams in 1824. John Quincy Adams, like Bush in 2000, lost the popular vote, and Al Gore became the 4th candidate in history to win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College. After Bush's victory, many Democrats cried foul, accusing Bush of stealing the election. Thomas E. Mann, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, reflected on the 2000 election, writing, "Bush ultimately garnered the presidency when a transparently political Supreme Court ended the manual recount in Florida that might have produced a different outcome. But many Republicans claimed the Florida recount controversy was overblown. In 2001, the Wall Street Journal reported, an exhaustive review of Florida's ballots suggested that George W. Bush would have won anyway." After the election, a debate ensued over the legitimacy of the Electoral College. One Yale professor argued in a Times editorial, "We must abolish it. Direct election would resonate far better with the American value of one person, one vote." Defenders of the Electoral College argued that it was designed to promote regional balance and protect the interest of states with small populations. Bill Clinton's diagnosis was different. In a private meeting with Gore after the election, Clinton argued that in several key states, including Arkansas and New Hampshire, Bush won by a slim margin. In those same states, Clinton enjoyed massive approval ratings. Clinton argued that if he had gone to those states, Gore would have won. As Clinton told him in their meeting, "I think you made a mistake not to use me more." But for many pundits, there was yet another reason. Ralph Nader won only 3% of the nationwide vote, but his total in Florida was much bigger than the gap between Bush and Gore. Nader's lawyer argued that Bush's victory was a result of a perfect storm of the Electoral College, the Supreme Court, and the hanging chads. In response, one angry Democratic voter wrote to the Washington Post, "The removal of any one of those elements would likely have put Gore in the White House. This is also true of Nader's doomed to fail candidacy." But for many Republicans, the answer to why Bush won was the candidate himself. Bush's message of compassionate conservatism resonated, especially with rural voters, men, and white Americans. So after the 2000 election, change was coming, but not to the electoral system. Change would come in the form of a national tragedy. 10 months after Election Day, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, America would be forever altered. On 9/11, as the day would come to be remembered, a series of terrorist attacks carried out on U.S. soil would rattle the foundations of America. In the midst of stark political divisions, these horrific acts of terror would bring about a rare moment of national unity. This is episode 54 of American Elections Wicked Game 2000, Getting Snippy. On the next episode, the election of 2004. As President George W. Bush navigates the challenges of his first year in office, he is confronted by one of the gravest tragedies ever to reach American shores. But Bush's response to 9/11 puts his presidency under fire. In the wake of the United States invasion of Afghanistan, Bush's decision to go to war with Iraq costs him politically and leaves the Democrats to look for a war hero candidate to lead them through a wartime election, Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. Did you know you can skip ads and promos like these and listen to all episodes of American Elections Wicked Game without interruption by subscribing at intohistory.com? And not only will you be getting the whole series ad-free and bingeable, but you also get access to over a dozen more incredible history podcasts, also ad-free, like Her Half of History. Because even though Hillary Clinton may not have made history when she ran for president in 2016, there have always been women who seized power, spied for their country, created artistic masterpieces, even escaped slavery. Her Half of History is perfect for all those who sat in history class and wondered, what were the women doing all this time? Because the answer is a lot. Get Her Half of History, Wicked Game, and many others ad-free at intohistory.com. Subscribe now at intohistory.com. This episode contains reenactments and dramatized details, and while in most cases we can't know exactly what was said, all our dramatizations are based on historical research. American Elections Wicked Game is an Airship production, hosted, edited, and executive produced by me, Lindsey Graham. Audio editing by Molly Bach. Sound design by Derek Behrens. Music by Lindsey Graham. Co-executive produced by Stephen Walters in association with Ritual Productions. Written and researched by Thomas Addy and Stephen Walters. Fact-checking by Greg Jackson and C.L. Salazar from the podcast History That Doesn't Suck.
In 1998, a Manhattan socialite disappeared from her mansion on the Upper East Side. After a brief investigation into the crime, detectives zeroed in on one woman, Sante Kimes. As the police and media looked into the story, they couldn't believe the rap sheet of the person they just picked up. Slavery, people trafficking, fraud, murder? What would drive someone to all of that? Hi, I'm Jeremy Schwartz, host of the true crime history podcast American Criminal. We take you inside the minds of some of our most notorious felons and outlaws, exploring the dark side to the American dream. In our latest season, the life and crimes of a woman so obsessed with wealth that she'd do just about anything to get it. Listen to American Criminal Sante Kimes wherever you get your podcasts. Or to get early ad-free access to the entire season first, plus hundreds of other ad-free history podcast episodes, subscribe at intohistory.com.